Hey everyone, synth here from The Attic, and today I want to talk a little bit about SynthMaster 2 by KV331 Audio. Now this video is fairly overdue. I originally purchased SynthMaster in like 2019 or something with the intent of doing an entire video series about it, but it never quite happened. And it's sort of laid in the back of my mind that I had to cover it at some point. And due to the fact that there's now a sale going on with SynthMaster, I thought, well, now's about as good a time as any to cover this synth and finally close this chapter. So in today's video I want to show you the interface of SynthMaster, kind of the feature set, and I want to spend a little bit of time making a patch. Then we'll talk about some pros and cons about this synthesizer. And if there are any questions left, you can drop them down below in the comments and I will see if I can make a follow-up video out of that, or maybe I'll do some slightly more advanced patching in a follow-up video. So SynthMaster 2 has been superseded by SynthMaster 3 very recently, so there might be things in this video that are not relevant for SynthMaster 3. The step from 2 to 3 is not a free step, and since 2.9 is still being sold, I'm going to assume that's still in support, and that's probably something you're interested in with the current promo, where it's only 29 euros. Instead of 129. So without further ado, let's hop into the DAW and let's talk about SynthMaster.
Alright, and here we are in SynthMaster 2.9 by KV331 Audio. Now I wanted to run this standalone, but for some reason the scaling got all messed up when I ran it standalone, and I tried to change the scaling. It's probably fixable with some messing around, but I didn't really feel like that, so we're running it in the DAW, which is probably how most people will run it anyway, so I'm not going to bother too much with it, but it's important to notice that there's some minor stability issues outside the DAW. Seems to be fine in the DAW, so that's what we're going with. Let's go over structure first. The synthesizer is quite deep, so this is going to take a little while, but the main concept is you have two layers. Every layer is a full synthesizer engine and they run independent from each other than of course your keyboard triggers, which are synced between the layers. And the effects are per layer, but you also have a global bus you can route both layers to. So this allows you to, for instance, use a single delay for both layer 1 and 2, so everything is nice and in time. It's a nice little feature to have. When we look at just a single layer, you will see that this is the actual structure of the layer right here. You have two oscillators. These oscillators by default get summed into a filter, which runs into a second filter if you wish to, and then you get all the effects. You can also set the filters in parallel, in which case the oscillators get summed and sent to filter 1 and 2 in parallel. You can also split them so you have a filter per oscillator, which is quite a nice feature. You can set these synth engines to poly or monophonic, and if you set them to monophonic you can set the slide here. Two modes, you either have a portamento mode or a slide mode. So the portamento mode, let's actually do a little bit more slide. And in the normal mode or in the slide mode, normal and slide. So with slides, every note slides. With portamento you only get a slide when you hold one note and start another note. Quite convenient. These engines can be run in unison mode, which is pretty nice. Unison setting is right here, up to 8 voices of unison. And you can set the spread and the cutoff and the pen right here, so you have detune. Now one thing to notice with SynthMaster is that there's no gain compensation or anything, so once you start to use unison or you start to add oscillators, the volume will increase significantly. which which can be a little bit annoying because it means a lot of going forwards and backwards to make sure your volume is up to par. But it could be worse. It's manageable. It's just something to keep in mind, and it also means that at times in this video the volume might dip. I'm not going to gain compensate everything in post because I'm way too lazy to do that. You have some velocity, error and spread settings here to add some randomness to the velocity and the spread. And you also get your volume and pen and your master pitch control. If you want to tune the entire thing, so both layers at the same time, there's the tune control down here for the master tuning. So if you want to run it in 443 Hz or whatever, you can do that. Pitch bend range, quite convenient. And that's about it. We're not going to talk too much about these settings, but there's also a phase and frequency modulation option, and there's an option to multiply or add using the modulators up here. Every voice has 2 oscillators. You can check those down here. Oscillator 2 has a sync mode, and they can be set to free running as well if that's something you like. There's a good selection of oscillator types going from the basic, saw, triangle, square, saw, pulse and noise. Important to note here is that these curves are quite interesting to start with. And if you go into pulse mode, the phase will change the pulse. It goes through 0, which is quite nice. You can set the unison for each oscillator up here with the voices up to 16 voices of unison. And if you want to change your unison settings, you need to go to voices, which is a little bit annoying because it requires a lot of clicking backwards and forwards. So keep that in mind. 16 voices of unison. And we need to actually give it a little bit of phase. Is very loud, as expected, because there's no gain compensation. So once again, if you're messing around with unison, expect things to get very loud. Nice thing here is that these oscillators have 16 voices of unison, but you also get the unison up here. So it's actually possible to make 8 voices of 16 voices. And because you have 2 oscillators, you can multiply that by 2 for a whole lot of voices. Every voice has its own AM and FM inputs. These are the modulators. And you have an algorithm up here to change some of the parameters. So for instance, we can bit crush our waveform, which is not going to do much on square. So let's do a sawtooth. And now if we go to the oscillator, we have a bit here to bit crush the waveform. Which is quite fun. Just a little bit of added control, as this is per oscillator instead of over the entire layer. Just gives you something extra to play around with. Underneath in the normal oscillator view, you have your volume, pen, coarse and fine tuning, phase and low cut, and whatever you have selected here will add another knob in most cases. And the voices control for the unison. Interesting to note here is that the volume is not routed to anything. The volume of the layer is controlled up here, so this is routed to your ADSR. Next up are the filters, which are up here. 2 filters, like I said, off by default. They offer a nice variety of filters. Standard low pass, high pass, band pass, bullshit, or notch. You get some more modes here: high shelf, low shelf, peaking, multi-mode and dual multi-mode. And if you run the analog, you can also create some self-oscillation here. If we turn off the voice and we up the resonance, let's just quickly reverse this, double click to reset, which is quite nice. Should be a standard on anything, but many software things forget that that's a handy function for some reason. Next to our filter modes, we also get a drive section here. So we can actually drive the filter. This can be done before, after, or inside the filter. So let's go for something that's fairly clean. Nice little sine wave. Let's add some drive. And you can change the characteristics of the drive as well. And the nice thing here is because you have this system here, you can actually split the filter, so you can have one oscillator with and one oscillator without drive. So if, for instance, we take a sine wave in oscillator 2, let's just tune this up for hearability. Now, one of the things to note is that the actual information about this knob is displayed up here, which is also a little bit annoying. And because the range is very high, you get a very big range, it's very tricky to exactly nail settings. Right clicking does help though. You can set it to, for instance, 1 octave, and that works. In this way the sine wave stays nice and clean, while oscillator 1 gets distorted. Down here you get your modulators, ADSRs. If you right click them, you have 4 ADSRs, you have MSECs, 4 of them, LFOs, 4 of them, sequencers, also 4, a keyscaler times 4, and a XY pad. 2 of those for a total of 4 parameters as well. ADSR 1 by default connected to a voice volume, so you still have 3 to attach to other things. And modulation is fairly easy to set up. So let's quickly set up a modulation on the filter cutoff. Just right click the filter, add modulation, you get all the sources. So let's do envelope ADSR 2. Give it a nice long attack time. Now this scale is a little bit tricky to get used to because it does tend to look like there's a lot going on, but it actually scales with the range. So right now it's just 1 second, which isn't all that long, but it looks like a very long time in this scale. So let's add this modulation. And for the sake of it, it might be a very good idea to make this slope a little bit more like this and add something with a little bit of harmonic content. So let's do a saw. There we go. That's a lot of gain again. Polyphonic ADSRs, which can be set to global, monophonic, or random as well, and bipolar or unipolar. You have a few different types, and I think the most interesting thing here is the lag. The lag kind of smooths out the curve, which is quite nice. If you're having some peaking issues, you can quite easily just dial in a little bit of lag. And that smooths things right out. No delay on the ADSRs, but it's a good thing we have MSECs, so we can work around that. Whenever parameters are automated, you will see this kind of circle around them. And if you click the parameter, you will get a routing matrix on the side, so you can see what is routed where. You can also see the amount of routing and change that right here. And it will display on the control what that change will look like. So if you move the dial around, You have a nice visual representation of what is going on. The interesting thing is you have multipliers and editors here as well. If you want to change your routing, you have some control here for multiplication or addition. There's also a via routing, which allows you to route things through other modulators. For instance, you can route an LFO through a keyscaler or stuff like that, which is quite interesting and pretty powerful. At the bottom you get this nice little keyboard. Above we have some of the standard modulators, our pitch bend, mod wheel, aftertouch, velocity, alternating, bipolar random, unipolar random, brightness and breath control are standard assignables. A tiny, teeny little panic button, which personally I would have loved to see a bigger panic button maybe up here, make it nice and bright and easy clickable, because this is not the best place for a panic button. Also, I think I just got it stuck by clicking too fast. If you click to the left, easy knobs, you get a bunch of macros here which you can assign. This is the XY controllers. And if you want to assign one of these, you can, for instance, choose to right click, add modulation, easy controls, easy one is now assigned to fine tune for oscillator 1. So it's really that easy. Gives you just a little bit more control over things. That's the basics. You have 2 layers of this, so you can basically create 2 completely separate tones and smash them together into one big preset. You also have the option to copy settings between layers. It's very convenient to have. You also have the option in the oscillators to copy oscillator settings from one to another oscillator and from one to another filter, which is very good. Same for MSECs, etc. If you want to take MSEC 1 and copy it to MSEC 3, for instance, you have that option to just paste it, which is very convenient. And then the last thing to talk about in this section is the arpeggiator. Now the arpeggiator is per voice, and this is something we'll exploit when making a preset for the synthesizer. There's quite a few modes actually. You can either just arpeggiate, which also have some chord sequencers, normal sequencers, and some up and down sequences, drum kit mode, which is pretty good. Range settings, step settings, timing, and velocity. You can MIDI record. For instance. And then when you activate it, and mess around with that, which is quite powerful. But we'll be playing around with that a little bit once we make a patch. And that should be all the basic features of SynthMaster 2. Alright, so now that we roughly know where all the controls are, we can make a simple little patch. So let's start off with our sawtooth. I'm fine with that. And let's make something like a kind of standard key sound. So let's do a bunch release time. Let's go to a second or something. As you can see, it looks very dramatic, but this is 1 second. Very nice. We can tweak that slope a little bit. That's very good. Let's preemptively lower the layer volume because we are going to use a little bit of a detune here. So let's kick up the voices to, let's say, 4. Bit of detune spread, bit of stereo spread. Pretty good, pretty good. I think I'm going to up the spread a little bit and then tweak the curve. I actually want to tweak it the other way around. And this kind of takes out that very close detune sound and makes it a little bit wider. That's pretty interesting. We have these little controls here. This is for drift, and this makes things a little bit more analog-like, where the pitch isn't exactly perfectly constant and always right. So let's just add a tiny bit of that. It's very subtle, but all the little bits count in the end. So let's keep that as oscillator 1. Let's add a second oscillator. And this oscillator is going to serve more as the attack portion of the sound. So let's do a square. Let's couple this to our second ADSR. We're going to kill the sustain, and we're just going to do quick attack. A little bit of a longer decay. That's a bit on the short side, I would say. Okay. Quite nice, a little bit buzzy, so let's kick in a filter. Let's do diode ladder for the fun of it. Let's find a setting that keeps some of the high end, but not all of it. Yes. Kind of ease it in there until you find a point. Might actually, with a little bit of resonance, be able to amplify that high end. Yeah, we're getting there. That's pretty good. Maybe just a little bit lower. Yeah, quite happy with that. That's quite interesting. It's still a little bit buzzy, so let's just dial it down a little bit more. And we're just going to keep it here for now. Let's add an arpeggiator to this layer. So to arpeggiate mode, let's just do a simple arpeggiator. So you can actually get a few less steps. Let's do up. Let's do it like this. That's quite nice. So let's keep this for our first layer for now, and then we can start using the second layer to add a baseline underneath that arpeggio. So this is one of the fun things of having two separate layers. Layer 2 will not be affected by the arpeggiator, so we can actually make this a mono patch. And we will set this to the first note priority. So the first note you play is the note which will be the bass note. Now let's activate layer 2, deactivate layer 1. Let's make this an octave lower. Sine wave. Pretty good. Now we want to use this as a bass layer, so we don't want to have a whole lot of sustain, but maybe a little bit more than this. That's an annoying thing. It remembers that we're on ADSR2. That's pretty good. Let's actually use the filter drive to add a little bit of distortion. Okay. Let's layer. Cool, still a little bit bass heavy, so let's dial down the bass a little bit. Now if we wanted to, we could also arpeggiate the bass. And the fun thing here is the timings are also separate from each other. So let's for fun put this at a 16th note. Let's put this at an 8th note. And for this we can use the sequence mode. So let's do 3 and then octave this one up. Single octave. And let's make the step timing a little bit shorter. Could be cool to make this just a little bit sustained, just a tiny bit more release. Yeah, that's pretty good. Let's just mess around with some effects as well while we're on it. So let's do layer 2. I'm still not quite happy with the amount of distortion we're getting. So let's switch to layer 2. Okay, it's pretty good. Layer 1. Let's throw in a little bit of chorus. I wouldn't call it a little bit, that's quite a lot. So let's dial down the width of the mix a little bit. And a little bit of reverb to wash it out a little bit. Pretty good. And we haven't done too much with modulation, so let's just quickly add a little bit of modulation here, just for interest's sake. So let's increase the pitch drift just a tiny bit. And let's actually take this detune spread and give it a little bit of life with a LFO. So let's do LFO 1. Let's put that into global mode. Let's have that bipolar actually. And let's set the amount to just a tiny little bit. It's a bit fast, so let's make it a little bit slower. that's pretty cool. So that's the basics of setting up a patch in SynthMaster. I'm just going to leave it at that for now. If there are any questions about SynthMaster or the workflow, leave them down below as well, and I can see if I can do a follow-up video, or I can just answer your questions in the comments. So that's it. See you in the next one.